Okay, so we start with gathering up glass out of the furnace. The furnace is 2100 degrees, and the glass we gather, it looks this like beautiful glowing orange. It's actually crystal clear. The color's just from the extreme heat that we use. So we start with the gather, kind of dip it up like honey, and then at that point we'll shape it with a couple of tools to make it into kind of an egg shape, and then we'll pop a bubble into it. At this point, the pipe we're using is hollow, so you'll see David, who's doing the starts on these, will put that into his mouth and then blow some air and cap it with his thumb. And then because there's moisture in your breath and through heat it expands, that glass at the end is so incredibly hot and it's still really viscous. It's moving like honey right now. It expands that air and pops a bubble into the bottom. So that gets it started. From there, we'll go into either a shape mold, and these are traditional molds that have been used in glass blowing for hundreds and hundreds of years. Just wood turned into a wet wood mold. We'll go into either a shape mold or a texture mold. We were making the L glass, so that we're using a shape mold to get the majority of the shape and also the volume consistent. Super important for a beer glass. It's like used to, I would hand make them, and they would be anywhere from like 10 ounces to 14 ounces. The most frustrating thing in the world is having a beer glass that holds like 11.5 ounces, you know, and you can't get it all in, and it's awful. So we use the molds for consistency and volume, make sure that it hits right, because we can't measure it in the hot shop. If we pour liquid into it, it's going to explode, like it'll violently explode. So we don't want to do that. So we use the molds, it helps us out. And then we have the molds for textures, like the sparkles, you saw the last piece. And that one gives that kind of pineapple or diamond texture on the outside. So once we do that, we'll flatten the bottom to make sure it's really nice and flat. Because this is one art piece that we make where it's more likely to break it the more you use it. You know, like each beer you have, so we want to make sure that it sits really, really flat, right? And so we'll flatten the bottom, and then at this point, Carrie will bring a punty, which is kind of like a little glue bit, like a temporary attachment. So we've got the bottom half or 3/4 done. And then we use the punty to stick on the very bottom, and it's like a glue bit. And we break it off from the blowpipe. This lets us switch the orientation so that we can, from this point, instead of focusing on the bottom, we're going to focus on the top. And then we heat up the lip. The hole at this point is only like 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch wide. Too small to drink beer out of. So we're going to get it hot and fix that. So we start shaping, heating just the tip. And now whenever we're doing this, that glass sets up in the course of like 15 or 20 seconds. So we have all these really fast little windows that we have to make it. So we have to constantly go back and flash it and get more heat into the glass so we can make it malleable again. Like I said, those windows are about 15 seconds, and the closer we get to the end, the smaller those windows get. And if we're off as little as 2 or 3 seconds, the piece will break and then we have to start all over again. We can't like undo it, redo it. It's a very unforgiving material, and that's one of the things that makes it so exciting to work with and challenging, because you always have to pay attention. We broke 2 right before you came in, and I've made thousands of these, and still, if we're not all synced up or like my head's somewhere else, you know, disaster will happen. So we change the axis, open up the top, and then at this point, it's like the L glass, we'll add a bit for the mustache. That starts as a separate, like solid bit, then we set it on the side, and then use like a little texture tool and cut it in half and fold the mustaches down. Now that, because it's a separate piece, we only get about a 30-second window total to get that shape right. And if we don't get the shape right, then we ruin it at the very end. You know, it doesn't look right. So we've got that, or with the sparkles, then we did a handle. So another separate bit. This one has 2 lines cut into the middle of it to make it really ergonomic, like it feels great in your hand and it keeps it from sliding around. And then apply that and fold it over. And most of the shaping on the handle, and also a lot of the shaping just in general, is done by either centrifugal force or gravity. You know, we swing glass or we let it hang and do a certain way. So when I'm pulling that handle out, I'm pulling it and then resting it at different times so that I get it to make that really beautiful swoop shape. You know, you see when I lay it down, it's already kind of got that form. And then I can adjust it a little bit, but you know, it should be pretty close right off the bat. And then at that point, we take a couple of flashes, even the glass out, because at this point, the lip is really hot and the back is really cold. If we put it into the annealer, then the whole thing's going to explode because it's got different working stress, different temperatures in it. So we take a couple of flashes, even everything out. Then we'll take it over, knock it off the punty. And again, so this one is, the timing has to be just right, because if we put a little bit too much, when we go to knock it off, we put a little water on it. If we put a little too much water on it, or the glass is too cold, when we go to hit it, then the whole thing cracks. It's pretty common. Like that, if there's a step where you're going to have a problem, this is one of the main ones. So we put just a little bit of water on that punty, give it a soft little tap, and then hopefully that breaks off nice and clean. Glass breaks the same way that stone breaks. So where it broke off is really sharp. Now we can either hand, sand that later, or what we do, we have a torch that goes about 6,000 degrees, and we spot heat that punty mark, where the sharp spot, and it actually gets back to molten. Just the skin of it goes molten, and then it rounds off and it's not sharp anymore. So it's called flame polishing. So that's how we do. And then after we do that, we have a little custom graphite stamp made that we stamp as our maker's mark on the bottom. And it's kind of the same concept of like an old school wax stamp on letters, except this is 6,000 degrees in lava. So other than that, it's exactly the same. And then we get done with that, then we put it in the annealer. The annealer's at a very cold temperature for us, 890 degrees. And that's at the point where it's called the annealing point, where the glass isn't so hot that it's changing shape, and it's not so cold where it wants to break. So it's not so hot where it's changing, it's not too hot to where it's changing shape, and it's not so cold where it wants to break. And that stays in. We load up all of the day's work into one annealer, and then at the end of the day, we take it on a controlled ramp down to room temperature over the course of 8 to 12 hours. And then the next day we drink out of it. That's it. Very simple. Yeah. My name is Matthew Cummings. I'm the owner of Pretentious Beer Company and Pretentious Glass Company. We're in the Old City and we're blowing some glass by hand. All right, cool.